who would be your favorite right now, at least on paper, to win the division?
So I think the Eagles have a better, I think that the roster minus quarterback, I think the Eagles are better than Dallas substantially. I also do think that Dak Prescott is the best quarterback in the division by a fairly wide margin. And it's not to, you can't really undersell that.
Hour number 3. Welcome back in, everybody. Derek Gunn, Barrett Brooks, Rob Ellis. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network, every day, 12 p to 3 p Eastern. All right, joining us now. I need to be Jimmy's agent. I promote these dumpster fire pieces because I freaking love them. But Jimmy Kempski from Philly Voice, Eagles writer. You can follow him on Twitter at Jimmy Kempski. Jim, welcome to the show, man. I think today we're up to the commies. The commies are today, and the Giants were yesterday, correct?
Right, and the Cowboys were. The Cowboys always bat leadoff because they attract the most attention. So
that's a given, yes.
And then the Eagles will be tomorrow morning.
Oh, you're going to do the Eagle? Why the Eagles?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I do the Eagles every year. In fact, I try to go harder on them than the other three.
Okay.
You got to keep up your,
your balances.
That's right.
Well, let me start with this. How much pushback? Because we think, it used to be, if you wrote back in the real newspaper days, if you wrote in Philadelphia, it didn't really, get around the world and the country like it used to. Now everything's, national and global and all that. How much pushback do you get from the opposing fan base when you write one of these? Do the Cowboys fans lose their minds?
I've been doing them for almost 10 years, I think now. Originally, they got a lot of pushback. Well, when they started getting popular, when they started getting a little bit more widely read, I'd get a ton of pushback. In fact, at the end of the series every year, I publish the funniest emails that I get from the series in its own article. Yeah. And those are usually pretty entertaining, but they've been fewer and far between the last, I'd say 2-3 years or whatever, but also this year with the Giants and Washington in particular. I had people just saying, yeah, that's pretty much right. I agree.
They're fans.
Yeah. They're basically just, I agree with everything you said. So those were a little easier to Washington was a little difficult, but the Cowboys one wasn't as hard to write as I come up with 10, legit things to, kind of knock them for. It was easier than I thought it was going to be for them. But to answer your question, yeah, I don't get as much of it as I did, 4, 5, 6 years ago or whatever, but I still do get plenty of people that don't like them.
I got you. That's awesome. Well, all right, let's start with the Cowboys then, just because why not? They are the leadoff team. Give us some reasons, dumpster fire, might be a bit of a stretch, but give us some reasons why they could be down this year than they were the last couple.
Yeah, so they got worse this offseason. I mean, they had a rough offseason in terms of the players they lost. They had to dump Amari Cooper's. They dumped because of his money. They're actually kind of lucky that they found a trade partner in the Browns, but, for the quality of player that he is, and he's the most productive receiver that they've had since they traded for him 3.5 years ago. They got a 5th round pick in return for him. So they traded him for essentially 50 cents on the dollar. And now you have left at wide receiver CeeDee Lamb, and you have Michael Gallup, who is coming off an ACL tear. He probably won't even be ready for the start of the season. And whenever he is ready, probably won't be 100%. So you looked at last year, like going into the season, you'd look at their wide receiving core and you go, I don't know how we're going to cover those 3 guys, Lamb, Gallup, and Cooper. Now they're not anywhere near scary. Their offensive line isn't as good anymore, in my opinion. Tyrone Smith is basically late stage Jason Peters at this point, where he missed, I think, 6 games last year. He missed 14 games the year before that. And then he missed 3 games in each of the 4 seasons before that. So he's missed 32 games over the last 6 seasons. And, his career is clearly in decline. Zach Martin's still a really, really good player, but he's getting up there in age. They lost La'el Collins. They lost their left guard, Connor Williams. They drafted a guy in the first round out of Tulsa who is really talented, raw, but talented. And he's
a penalty machine too, right?
14 penalties, I think it was. Either 14 or 16 penalties at Tulsa, like in the AAC. Oof. And now, he's going to be in the NFC East, where he's facing guys like Jonathan Allen and Leonard Williams and all the great defensive tackles that the Eagles have on a week-to-week basis. Now he's got to learn a new position because he's a tackle at Tulsa. And then whenever Tyrone Smith gets hurt, what are they going to? They're going to ask him to bump back out to left tackle when he's been repping at left guard all off season. So then there's that one more thing on the Cowboys. This is a positive for their 2020.
Don't think we're going to stop you, by the way. Just
really. Right. We can spend a whole half hour on Dallas if you want.
Take your time. Really. Sit back.
The best argument I think I have in there in terms of potential regression is that they had 34 takeaways last year. They led the NFL with 34 of them. Trayvon Diggs had 11 interceptions. He's not going to have 11 interceptions again in 2022. They're not going to have 34 takeaways again in 2022. In fact, I looked at all the teams over the last, I think I went back as far as like 2016 or something like that, because that gave me a big enough sample size. I looked at all the teams that had at least 30 takeaways in one season, and on average, they averaged something to the effect of like 9 fewer takeaways the following season, which is, more than like a half a takeaway per game. So, I mean, they really benefited from being able to take the ball away from their opposite when we saw it when the Eagles played them, especially in week 3 last year. So, I think that's really a good argument. And they also had 6 defensive touchdowns too, by the way, which is a crazy number. Yeah. So, they're obviously forcing turnovers. They're skilled to it, but there's also an element of luck to it. And they certainly had their share of that last year as well.
It's fast. Well, let me ask you about Diggs. Oh, go ahead, Derek.
I'm surprised you didn't mention the number one reason why Dallas is going to be a dumpster fire. Mike McCarthy. Well, I'm shocked you left him off the list.
Well, he was number one in my article.
Okay. Right.
He was in the article. He was the number one reason, and of course, I pointed to how their season ended last year. I mean, they've had some. If you're a Cowboys hater, they have had some delicious failures over the last 5-10 years.
Delicious failures.
I like that.
But that Dak, it wasn't a QB, it was a QB draw.
It's the greatest.
When they had 14 seconds or whatever it was. When he started running, I remember watching that game in my hotel room in Tampa and saying, like, this game's over. There's no way they're getting this snap off. And then sure enough, they didn't.
Who called this? I'm like, who called this? Oh, okay. My fault.
We were in a commercial break. I was doing the post-game show with Dan Klecko.
Okay.
And as soon as the play, same thing, Jim. As soon as the play began, Klecko and I just look at each other like, wait, 5-4. Like, there's no chance here. It was glorious the way that ended. It was so Cowboys and so McCarthy-esque. It was a beauty. It was a thing of beauty. It really was. Yeah, I actually replay it in the house sometimes just for kicks.
I remember cackling in my hotel room, and I was in Tampa for the Eagles Buccaneers loss. Right. Obviously, it was the same day. It was just the Cowboys Niners game was later that day, and I remember cracking up laughing in my I can't believe the play call. And also, what I love about that call too is if they get the snap, if they get the spike off, what's their chance of winning at that point? Because they're still at like the 26, 25 yard line, something like that. Yeah. What's the chance they score in the next play? 3-4%, something like that.
Yeah.
So their fans act like they'd gotten that spike off. They're going to the Super Bowl. And we see that in Philly all the time too, like with the quadruple doink by Kawhi Leonard. Oh, he misses that. We're gonna win the championship. Yeah. Forget that you got to beat them in overtime, and then you got to beat the Bucks and the Warriors. And same thing with the Eagles. Alshon Jeffrey has the ball go through his hands and into the hands of Marshawn Lattimore. Oh, if he makes that catch, they're winning the Super Bowl again. Yeah. No. Yeah. It doesn't mean that at all.
Go ahead, Barry.
Well, I'm just saying, man, looking at Dallas, looking at, their defense, I mean, they lost a lot with Randy Gregory and his ability to rush the passer. I thought Leighton Vander Esch was getting, I thought he was a little hurt last year. That's why that might just be who he is, now, just age like that. So even that defense, he's Micah Parsons is not going to sneak up on anybody now.
Right.
They know him now. So to think that he put out there that he's going to have at the very least 15 sacks next year. Ooh. He said that. He said at the very least I'm going to have 15 sacks next year at the very least.
He might.
Come on now. No, you got offensive linemen out there. That's not happening. That's one thing that's not happening. Anybody else can beat me for a sack. Lawrence can beat me for a sack, but there's no way Michael Parsons from this point on is going to beat me for a sack. And that's just how these older guys are going to think about it, man. Watch what I tell you.
Well, on your Vander Esch point, the rest of the NFL agrees because he signed a 1-year deal for like $2 million or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
Back to the Cowboys.
Yeah,
So
really.
that and then their defensive tackles are weak. They're weak up the middle, and then Lawrence and Parsons, to be determined what Parsons' role will even be. I mean, he's a linebacker first and foremost. He filled in as an edge rusher because they had so many injuries last year, particularly with Lawrence. But one maybe thing that you can look at, Lawrence's production has been terrible. Not terrible, but it hasn't been up to where he signed a huge contract, like 5 years, 100-something million a few years ago.
A lot of shutting down last year. Being put it on him last year.
And his sack production, I think there is like 50-something players that have more sacks than him since he signed that contract across the league. So maybe the emergence of Parsons and the extra attention that Parsons is going to get, maybe that opens up a little something for Lawrence. But yeah, you're right. Like I kind of look at the roster the same way that I looked at their rosters around like the Romo, DeMarcus Ware, Dez Bryant years, where they had, some star players at the top, like in this case, Parsons and Trayvon Diggs. And, on offense, you can maybe throw CeeDee Lamb in that mix, Dak Prescott. But then once you get past those guys, it's a lot of just, it's just a lot of kind of, average starters and not a lot of depth. So they reminded me, it's sort of how they build their roster. It reminds me of like what they were 10 years ago.
Interesting. All right, so let's move on. We'll do Giants next. You want to do Giants next?
Sure.
All right.
I mean, take a pick.
Yeah, I mean, it is so much. This is like fish in a barrel, man. This is like, it's glorious. But what I can't get past here with them, as much as Derek and Barrett bring up Mike McCarthy for the Cowboys, no doubt, I can't get past Daniel Jones. I just don't buy Daniel Jones. Flat out don't buy it. And I think Dable actually eventually will be a good coach for them, but not right now with that guy quarterbacking. Where do you stand on the Giants, and what were your
that's certainly fair. I mean, he's been a turnover machine since he entered the league. He actually started out last season on the right track. His first 4 games, I think he had like 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. He ran for a couple touchdowns. He was averaging almost 300 passing yards per game. I think his QB rating was up around 100. And then he fell off after that. Like his QB rating, not that that's a great measure, but like during the rest of his games was like 75 or something like that. And their offensive line has been awful for, a really long time. Their wide receivers were often injured last year. Kadarius Toney had, sort of a roller coaster season for them last year.
Kenny Galladay was hurt.
Kenny Galladay had zero touchdowns.
Yeah, miserable there too.
He had 0. He and Kadarius Toney combined for 0 touchdowns. They had their wide receivers, like all of them, had 6 touchdowns combined last season. So, I mean, that just goes to show you what kind of offense they have. The one thing I will say for Jones is at least their offense was semi-functional when he was playing.
Yeah.
When he got hurt and they were throwing Mike Glennon and Jake Fromm out there, I mean, they were just –
we saw it. We saw it here.
They didn't look like a professional offense. The Week 18 game, Joe Judge is running 2 consecutive QB sneaks from inside his own 5-yard line to make.
We ate him up.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
You're right.
We ate him up. I forgot about that.
Daniel Jones. I mean, they've even the owner John Mara even said this offseason, we've done everything possible to screw this kid up. And they're right. Like they haven't given him any support in terms of offensive line, coaching stability, wide receiving talent. I guess the talent has been there, but they haven't been able to stay on the field.
Right.
So I don't know. We'll see what Dable can do with him. Dable's hanging his hat on Josh Allen, helping develop him into the elite talent that he's become. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that you can look at with that Buffalo team on why they're a lot better now than they were a few years ago. Obviously, Allen becoming a better quarterback is the big number one reason. But they've gotten other good players along the way there. I think their coaching stability has gone a long way toward making them the success that they are. So the idea that Dable's going to come in here come to the Giants and they're going to turn into the Buffalo Bills all of a sudden, I don't think it's quite that easy. Daniel Jones, by the way, they declined his 5th-year option for 2023. So this is the last year he's under contract there. It'll be interesting to see what happens if he is actually decent in 2022, but it's more likely than not they're going to be looking for a new quarterback next offseason.
Where are they in other areas, like defensively? We obviously focus on Jones, but I mean Saquon's trying to, I guess, come back or whatever we want to call it from some down years with injuries and whatnot. Just other areas where.
Yeah, so their focus during the offseason was to make their offensive line functional. In free agency they signed Mark Lewinsky, right guard. They signed the center from Buffalo, John Feliciano, which makes sense. Dable probably just wanted one guy in there that knew his offense, and that makes sense at the center position. So, all right, those guys are they're both 30 years old, so they're not like building blocks or anything like that, but they'll help them become functional immediately. Mm-hmm. Then in the draft, they take Evan Neal, so he's going to start at right tackle. Yeah. They have Andrew Thomas already, who they took 4th overall a few years ago. He struggled as a rookie; he was a little better last year. And then they also drafted a couple offensive linemen from North Carolina. One of them is Joshua Izudu. I'm not that into college football that I know that I can give you a scouting report on him so much. Yeah. But he's a 3rd rounder and he's expected to start at left guard. So they have new faces there, which is better than the old terrible faces, but they're also going to have zero continuity along that offensive line, which is a big deal in the NFL. And then, they also drafted Kayvon Thibodeau, 5th overall, the pass rusher from Oregon. So, maybe he'll give their defense a little bit more juice. Their linebackers, they've kind of been a trouble spot for them over the years. I think that'll remain the same. And then at corner, they're really so they have Adoree Jackson, who they signed in free agency last year. He's fine as a starting quarterback. I don't think he's a CB1 by any stretch. Like, he's not going to trail opposing receivers all year and be expected to shut them down.
Right.
All of their other corners combined, I think it was either 6 or 8 combined career starts. So they're really inexperienced on the back end back there. So it's going to be a bad team again. The one thing, if I'm a Giants fan, I'm looking at that team. It's like, okay, well, at least maybe we'll be bad enough where we can draft Bryce Young or the kid from
Stroud.
Ohio State, whose name is escaping.
CJ Stroud. Yep.
Stroud. Thank you.
Yep.
But the problem with them is there are so many really bad teams, particularly in the NFC. You got the Seahawks, with Drew Lock and Geno Smith competing for that job. You have the Falcons, who are going to be terrible. You have the Panthers, who are going to be terrible. Then you got 5 teams that have 2 first-round picks who could all potentially use a quarterback next year. Texans, Eagles, Lions, Dolphins. Who am I missing? Whatever. There's a 5th one. Yeah. They all need quarterbacks. So maybe some of them might need quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. They're going to have maneuverability to move up in the draft to potentially jump the Giants if they don't land like the number 1, 2, 3 overall pick. So they're kind of in a position where they might have improved enough where they won't be able to be in a great spot to get an elite quarterback.
Yeah, the worst place you could be, right? Yeah, that kind of purgatory area. Yep. No question about it. All right, let's jump to Washington. We were saying this earlier, Jim. Mm-hmm. In fairness, if Wentz is decent, there's talent there. I mean, there's always a circus, and that's where we'll start. But there's always other stuff floating around with them. Yep. But there definitely is talent with Washington going into the season. A lot of it is going to be how much does Daniel Snyder take a blowtorch to his own team, and how much does Carson Wentz play well or not play well?
Yeah. Well, they just re-signed Terry McLaurin to a 3-year deal, 70-something million. It's in the same ballpark as like A.J. Brown deserved. I think he's an awesome player. They go and draft Jahan Dotson out of Penn State. Their 3rd receiver gave them nothing last year. So they signed Curtis Samuel to a 3-year deal, 30-something million. Did nothing for them last year, but he's expected to contribute this year. So you got McLaurin, Dotson, Samuel. It's a decent 1, 2, 3 for Carson.
Cam Sims is pretty good also.
Who's that?
Cam Sims.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Receiver from Alabama. He stepped in and was like the number 2 for him when Samuels didn't do anything.
And then you have Logan Thomas, who tore an ACL last year. He may not be ready to start the season on time, but when they do get him, he had 72 catches, 6 touchdowns a couple seasons ago. Not last year. He had dealt with injuries all year. But if he can come back and he's healthy and he can produce anywhere near that, then that's another guy that can give him a boost. Offensive line took a little bit of a hit because they lost Scherf, Brandon Scherf in
Yep.
agency to the Jaguars. So that's maybe a little problem area. Defensively, I think a big, like I mentioned, Thomas. I mean, defensively, they have Chase Young, who also tore an ACL last year. He may not be ready to start the year on time. We'll see on him. But, you look at just their starting front four on that defensive line. You got Chase Young. You got Jonathan Allen, who I think is awesome, by the way.
Yeah, he is.
Daron Payne and
He's also awesome.
So if those four guys, I mean, they're like top three in my opinion, just in terms of starting front four in the NFL. Those four guys are really good. Their linebackers are terrible, so that's their big problem area. In the secondary, I think their corners are good enough with William Jackson and Kyle Fuller. So I mean, you're right. It is. They do have talent on that roster. I don't think Carson is in a better situation there than he was in Indianapolis a season ago. I think this is a downgrade for him. But that's not a team that's on the same level as like the Giants, for example.
Right. Makes sense.
My biggest fear with this Washington team is I don't expect them to win the division, but I do expect them, if they stay healthy, because you're right, they got some key injuries they're going to have to overcome. They could upset the apple cart in a lot of ways in the NFC if they can put it all together. I mean, this is a team. My biggest question is, will these guys play for Jack Del Rio on defense after the comment he made?
Right.
Okay. Jonathan Allen said, I don't care what he says as long as he coaches us. Right. Yeah, okay. We'll see how that plays out, because more is going to be coming once they get to training camp. If they can overcome these injuries, and I'm looking at a Carson Wentz and I'm thinking, you've been dumped by two teams in a span of 1 year. In a 12-month period, you've been dumped by two teams. So there has to be some truth behind the fact that you are the problem and not the teams that are the problem. So as a man, you're going to have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, I've got to prove people wrong, because this could be my last hurrah as a starter in the National Football League. Now, I do believe when he plays his game, Carson Wentz can play an upper-level game in the National Football League. He's got some weapons. They've got a decent running game. Offensive line, little question mark. But this team kind of scares me, because if Ron Rivera gets them to focus and play football, they're not going to be as bad as some people may think they are.
Yeah, that run game is a good point too. I failed to mention that. Antonio Gibson, and they drafted Brian Robinson out of Alabama in the third round. And then you have J.D. McKissick, who's a good receiver out of the backfield. So they're strong there, in my opinion, that trio. I did want to piggyback off your Jack Del Rio point. You don't have to like your coaches.
No.
Like players don't like coaches when they ride them too hard, or they're not playing them as much as they want, or they don't like the way they're being used in the scheme. And that's fine. That happens at every level in sports. But when dislike turns into disrespect, then that's when it really becomes a problem. And you have a guy like comparing what happened on January 6th to like the Black Lives Matters protests of 2020.
Yes.
God, like forget that, like that thought's even in your head, but are you stupid?
Right.
Do you not realize that like players on your team are like, they're invested in that? Like, what are you doing?
Malcolm Jenkins would have blew the team up.
Oh my goodness.
Right. It'd have been a fractured team.
Exactly.
I had no problem with what Del Rio was saying in terms of, I don't understand why people use this as a cloak and dagger to destroy people's livelihoods, to loot and to pillage for their own personal gain. But he should have stopped right there and just left it right there.
Right.
But no, no. And so players are going to be looking at him sideways, and they said they've already had a team meeting. There's going to be more than one team meeting behind this, I guarantee you.
Yeah. I mean, they had one. He apologized in front of the team. Like, he spoke in front of the team for 10, 15 minutes, opened up the floor for questions or whatever. Not too much detail came out of that or whatever, but certainly. I mean, Ron Rivera was clear to note that he fined him, Ron Rivera was like, I'm a big First Amendment guy. You can say, you're free to speak your mind, whatever. But I fined him because it became a distraction to our football team. So we already know that players were really pissed off about it, or else he wouldn't have fined $100,000.
No doubt. No question
about it.
Well, let's go fair and balanced then, Jim. Why are the Eagles going to be a dumpster fire? What are the biggest concerns?
Here we go.
So I haven't written that one yet.
Give us a teaser.
I've written a couple bullet points, but So, I mean, I think that the two obvious first things that you look at are, the quarterback and the defensive coordinator. The defensive coordinator, they had 5 quarterbacks against them throw for over 80% last year. And then if there's any decent quarterback that they faced, they got torn apart. And I remember, so like those 5 quarterbacks, they faced all those guys in their first 9 games. After those 9 games, they faced a lot of crap. I mean, you're talking about guys like Garrett Gilbert, and
Jake
Brennan and Fromm and Heineke and who was the Saints quarterback? Was that
it was Taysom
Hill? It wasn't Hill. No, it was the other guy.
It was the guy. He's bounced around out of Northwestern. Simeon.
Yes, Trevor Simeon, good work. Yeah, so they're facing all these guys, and then I remember that was a full half season that they faced all these crap quarterbacks. They make the playoffs, and I remember we were all kind of like talking ourselves into the idea, oh well, maybe they've made the proper adjustments, and when they face Tom Brady this time around, it's going to be different. Nope, they went up 31-0 like that.
Yeah, Jim, they were good. They're good, Jim. They are.
Tore him apart again. So I don't know. We'll see if they have better players on defense. No question about it. They add, Nakobe Dean. They add Jordan Davis. They add Hassan Reddick. They're going to get Brandon Graham back. Yep. Bradbury, they signed free. They're a better defense than they were a year ago, personnel wise. Are they still going to play these soft shell coverages against these good quarterbacks? Because if they do, it really doesn't matter who your personnel is. These guys are going to pick that apart. So
that's right.
I think that's a big question mark. And then Jalen Hurts, I think we all know he's a leader and he's got all the intangibles and he's smart and he can make plays with his feet. Can he become more accurate and can he get the ball out a little bit quicker than he has, his first year and a half in the league? So he's got all the weapons at his disposal. Their offense is stacked, man. Like it's the best offensive line in the NFL, in my opinion. You have Devontae Smith, you have AJ Brown. I think Quez Watkins is a decent enough number 3. You have Dallas Goedert. I mean, the running backs aren't, I don't think anyone thinks of those guys as special, but they had the number 1 rush offense in the NFL last year. So they did, they did enough. So it's all there for Hurts to kind of take this team to the next level, but we'll see what happens there. One thing I will say about the Eagles too, is in addition to playing all these, bad quarterbacks last year, they had, pretty good injury luck, at least compared to other years. But beyond their own injury luck, they faced a lot of teams that were completely decimated by injuries. Like the Saints, for example, didn't have Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Jameis Winston, Teron Armstead, Ryan Ramczyk. I'm missing a few others, but we're talking about like all Pro Bowlers there. The Washington, they're missing like 15 guys on the COVID list.
The Wednesday night, whatever it was game. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They were down to their 4th quarterback in that second matchup. So the Giants were, I mean, they had injuries that were terrible. So I think that's sort of an under-discussed thing, that they did have injury luck, but they also faced a lot of teams that were completely depleted.
Who, Jim, I don't know if we kicked this around last time we talked, but who would be your favorite right now, at least on paper, to win the division?
So I think the Eagles have a better I think that the roster minus quarterback, I think the Eagles are better than Dallas substantially. I also do think that Dak Prescott is the best quarterback in the division by a fairly wide margin. And it's not to, you can't really undersell that. I think the Cowboys and the Eagles are clearly more talented than Washington. And then, the Giants, we'll see you guys in 2024, maybe. I think the Eagles are better than the Cowboys overall. And I actually do think the Eagles are going to win the division. I don't know that they're going to win 11, 12 games or anything like that, but I do think that they're going to be good enough to win the division. And again, all 4 of these teams, they have like Eagles, Giants, Cowboys, Washington. I forget what order it is, but they have the 4 easiest schedules in the entire NFL because they all play each other, first of all, and then they also play the AFC South, which is bad, and the NFC North, which is mostly bad. They're well positioned to to repeat, go into the playoffs again. I also do think they will win the division.
You can follow him at Jimmy Kempski on Twitter, and of course phillyvoice.com. So the when's the Eagles dumpster fire coming out?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow. So you're cracking.
I can't wait to see the comments behind this.
That's
I'm
what's going to
looking
get
forward
fun.
to this, man.
They're going to run you out of town again.
There's nothing more dangerous than an Eagles fan with optimism.
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
That's a good point.
Wow.
Jim, keep up the good work, man. We always love
Thank you,
catching
bro.
up with you.
Appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
guys.
Appreciate you, bro.
All right, you guys, Jimmy. I do. I like, in fairness, that he does an Eagles one too. He's
Yeah,
not just dumping on the other teams in the NFC.
Exactly.
Right. I don't know if I did it that way. You know what I'm saying? I left well enough alone, you know.
Yeah, that's good.
I'd rather go to Wawa in peace.
I'm with you, man. Let him
really.
let him catch that smoke, as they say.
I don't even be wearing a hoodie when I go to the mall.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Jimmy from parts unknown. We're not really sure where he is at this point. Yeah, I hear you. All right, so let's step aside, guys. We roll into the final segment. We got a bunch of different things to hit. Jalen Brunson's about to get paid. Number one, we'll give you the latest on what's going on with the Deshaun Watson. The Jazz hire the youngest coach in the NBA. We got a bunch of other stuff that we're going to dip into when we get back. Don't go anywhere. Derek Gunn, Barrett Brooks, Rob Ellis. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network.